Hello, everyone. This is Levon McMillan, founder and CEO of Advocate for Me. Welcome to our podcast today. Today, I have a colleague, and I'm so excited that she was able to come on today. We actually work as a team with one of our families, and she is like an awesome speech therapist. Like, she has so many activities now that we're doing teleintervention, and I wanted her to come on and talk to our listeners about speech therapy, communicating, and how to work with your child. So today our guest is Ali Navia, and I will let her introduce herself and share with you what she does for the early intervention community.
Thank you so much, Levon. I'm flattered with the introduction. It's been really great working with you. My name is Ali Navia, and I am a speech therapist located in Philadelphia. I work primarily with children in early intervention through ChildLink. That's how I met Levon. I also work with a couple of children in the preschool age. I also work for a private practice, and I also have a small private practice of my own called Philly Speech and Language.
Awesome. So I guess the first question would be, what made you want to become a speech therapist?
So I have a younger brother. I feel like with everyone, there's always a story of someone that had received some sort of special education services that had to do with speech. And mine was my brother, and he was born with a unilateral complete cleft lip and palate. So he didn't have an upper lip, and the hole went all the way from his upper teeth area all the way behind his nose. And that kind of prevented him from being able to talk for quite a while. So he had early intervention services and was unfortunately misplaced into a special education school, even though his IQ was really high because he didn't have speech. So they thought that he had a lot more deeper developmental disorders. But now he is doing great. He's about to graduate medical school. He was the valedictorian of his high school. He's one of the most accomplished people that I know. So he was kind of misplaced, and just a story like his and meeting all the wonderful people he did have speech with kind of made me want to get into the field.
Awesome. So growing up and watching him with the speech therapist, what would you say was the one thing that stood out for you to say, I think I want to do that when I grow up?
I think it was his elementary school speech therapist. I'm not going to forget her. People were always excited to leave class to go hang out with her, and they always came back with stickers and cool things. And my brother always looked forward to going to meet with her. And she just had this great mannerism and energy with her that just seemed to light up all the rooms and make all the children and other people around her really happy. And it was just really great to be around her, and I wanted to kind of be like her one day.
Well, I can attest that you are like her. Like, even though we haven't met in person, we've been doing all our visits with our families via Zoom, but you can feel that through your the Zoom when we're working with our family. Like, you make the kids light up, like you keep them engaged, you have activities for them to keep them motivated and making sure that they're, with whatever speech strategy they're working on, that you're working on it through pictures, sounds, how to, move their mouth, and how to communicate with the parents. So I never met that teacher, but just from you saying that, I definitely can say that you're a copy of her.
That's flattering. I aspire to be like her one day. I'm hoping a couple more years down my belt that I'll feel that energy that she brought out.
Awesome. And that's funny that you said that, because mine was my second grade teacher. Like, I always wanted to be a teacher in a classroom because of her, although God had other alternatives, because apparently I'm a teacher without walls. So I'm not in a school district, but I am teaching through early intervention. I actually have a class that I teach adults with early intervention. So I teach all ages. So from birth to adulthood, and it's always geared around special needs or early intervention. So we always do have that one teacher, or, or maybe a few handful of teachers that inspired us to want to become a teacher or wanted to work in education. So, and I think I've shared this story on a podcast before, that I went to school. I went to Albright College to for early childhood and family studies. And so my focus was, I remember, and I actually still have this card 20 years later, that we had to write our name. It was like our name tag. So we had to write our name on the front of it. And we had to put on the inside what we wanted to be when we graduated. So I put that I wanted to be a teacher for 10 years, and then I wanted to become a principal. And then after I became a principal, then I was going to retire and open up my own school. So now when I look at it, I'm like, well, I did teach, but I didn't teach in the school district. I taught in like Head Start. So I did a lot of early childhood education. And before I came into early intervention. And then now, like I said, I'm teaching, but it's all different ages. So now when I look at it, I'm like, wow. So I'm a teacher without woes. And then, so I am, right now I'm working on a project where I want to open up an after school program for children with special needs and a respite care. So the location, we did find a location in West Philly. So we're working on that now, getting the rest of the funding for it.
That's awesome.
Thank you, so that we can open up in Philadelphia. We have the pandemic and COVID-19, so they keep going through the restrictions and cutting down the number of people that can be in the room. So we may not start until like the spring, but still do like maybe emergency care once we get the keys to the location. So and I know you said that you have your own private practice. So what motivated you to open up your private practice?
So in the past, I was in a school. So I worked for a charter network, and I was, I guess, an educator within walls. And I loved working with all the kids that I worked with. I loved being in a community and working on teams with different teachers and professionals. However, I just felt that I wanted to work a little bit more personally with those kids. And I felt that some of my children that were struggling a little bit more than the others really benefited from one-on-one therapy. And that's when I started exploring early intervention. And that's how my side gig became my full-time gig. And once again, I feel like that's the process that I'm going through. I'm finding like kind of my niche with pediatrics, definitely kids that I want to work with. But I also don't want it to be kind of under somebody else's jurisdiction on when I can see them or how often I can see them, that I can kind of use my own clinical judgment as well as listen to a lot of the family needs to deliver the services and try to get these kids in and out of therapy as quickly as possible.
Awesome. So I know you just spoke a little bit about the family's needs. So when you get a new case, whether it's at your private practice or through early intervention, what are some of the things that you're looking for to see the strengths in the child, and then what challenges the child may have?
So the first thing that I kind of look for is how the child is communicating and how much they understand. A lot of times when given a lot of new cases, there are a lot of children that aren't using words yet, or they have a very limited vocabulary. And before expressive language develops, receptive language has to develop first. So these children need to understand that we use language as a function for something. They need to understand what it means, and it has to have meaning to them before they can use it functionally. Because we can have kids, and this happens a lot with children on the autism spectrum, they will listen to something and hear something and repeat it, but they're not using the words functionally. They're repeating some songs, they're repeating nursery rhymes, but they're not really using it to kind of access their wants and needs. So it's something that I look in very closely with families. And then I speak with the parents and try to find out what aspects of their daily routines or what aspects of their child's communication breakdown that they need help with, so that we can kind of bridge anything that they're missing there and try to help kind of form those connections and make communication more meaningful, as well as kind of decrease some of the frustration that the kids have because of the communication breakdown that they have. So it's kind of like a puzzle each time I work with the family, but it's usually I try to get to really know the kid first, figure out what they really like, and then kind of figure out how we can use the parent and have them kind of implement a lot of the strategies.
Awesome. So I have two questions. So the first one is, I know you mentioned about frustration with communication. I know I went through that with my son.
Mm-hmm.
He was born premature, 28 weeks. And that was my introduction to early intervention, was becoming a parent first, and then working for ChildLink as a service coordinator, and then moving into the special instructor position. And one of the things that he used to do is he would either hit when when I wasn't able to figure out what his need was, or what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then, or he would just like drop on the floor and just like scream.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and I know when I work with families now in early intervention, like that's like their main thing. If the child is not communicating or have
Mm-hmm.
enough words to communicate their wants and needs, the families always say, well, he's hitting, he's throwing something, he's screaming, or he's just like crying, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what he wants, and I can't figure it out. And the more that I can't figure it out, the more he's getting frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do have some children where they do get to the point where they'll start banging their head, or it gets a little extreme because of their frustration. So what do you tell a parent when it's a child? Because it looks like, I know when we get our paperwork, it looks like it's a behavior
Mm-hmm.
situation. But it could just like you were saying, it could just be the frustration of someone not understanding what
Mm-hmm.
your want or need is. So what would you say to our listeners, if anyone is experiencing that with their child?
So it's really, really hard to do this, but the first thing to do is kind of just stay calm and follow the child's lead. So if you're seeing that the child is, as long as the child isn't being safe, you just kind of have to calmly wait a little bit and then try to help kind of either redirect and try to get them to play. So it's really hard to find out sometimes, especially when the child's so heightened, like what they want and what they need. But when children are at that heightened state, they're not going to do a lot of learning. And I've found this in my experience in person, or even like observing on Zoom when I'm working with parents. They'll see the child is so frustrated, but that child is not going to do any learning, and they're offering choices. Do you want this, or do you want this? Do you want this? And it's just all of these questions, especially with a child with a language delay. It's so much language to process. It's placing a lot of demands, and it would be really helpful to kind of turn this experience where it's really, really difficult into a play experience. So I like to kind of just follow the child's lead. If the child's still really, really upset, okay, like let's try to sing a song and let's do this. And it's more of, instead of asking that question, kind of gently lead into that activity. If the child was playing with a truck and ended up throwing it, you can pick up the truck and say, oh, is it okay? I know that you're feeling really mad right now, and let's go make the truck feel better, and kind of turn it into a play experience. And once the child kind of sees that, the parent's not really, really heightened and upset, and that they just want to play, it'll help and reestablish some of that calmness and some of that rapport. But that's not something that's really easy, and it doesn't happen all right away. And there's other strategies. You can also try to get the child to kind of find how do I explain this? Find out like what that threshold is before the child like hits the wall. Make sure that you don't push them to that point. Sometimes we try to give children choices when they're not ready for them. Do you want the cup? Do you want the truck? Do you want this? Do you want this? And sometimes the child's just overwhelmed and they might need to be picked up, or they might just need a hug. Like a lot of times we have to kind of read and see what the child is feeling, what the child is thinking, before we kind of just try to offer and throw things at them. I don't know if that made sense. If you can, I don't know if that shed light on it. But
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. because I'm just like while I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of it
Mm-hmm.
as with my parent hat on and not my
Mm-hmm.
special instructor hat on. And I think like when you were saying like to keep calm and to make sure that you follow the lead of the child, because I know sometimes the parent can be overwhelmed, the child can be overwhelmed, and then it's like that fight and flight mood. Like it's either, leave me alone, or they'll
Mm-hmm.
go run off, or, they'll, start hitting or throwing something, because they're not understanding why you're not, giving them what they need at that moment. But I
Mm-hmm.
love the fact that you said turn it into like a play moment, because
Mm-hmm.
kids learn through play. So I love that fact that you said that. Um, and then that way that'll actually calm the situation down. And that's redirecting them so that they're not really paying attention to what they wanted at that moment. And then you can kind of like, once you um, look at the situation, and you may be able to figure out what it was that they wanted or what they needed, or they may forget about what they wanted or needed because now they're playing with something else. So
Mm-hmm.
that is a good strategy. And you kind of touched upon um like the different strategies that a parent can use. So I'm thinking of like a 12 to 18-month child
Mm-hmm.
who has like a few sounds, they're babbling. And I
Mm-hmm.
know we both use this with early intervention where we have the child look in the mirror
Mm-hmm.
with the parent. Can you talk about the reason for the mirror, and then for the mirror therapy, and then also like what things should they do in front of the mirror to help with the child's communication?
So, using the mirror is awesome for the child's awareness of themselves. So, doing something like doing a song, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, or just starting to identify body parts. Where's your eyes? Touch your eyes. Kind of lets the child see themselves. And it's almost like they gain the sense of, oh, I'm controlling this, I'm able to do this. And it's cool for them to see themselves move and kind of manipulate their hands in certain ways and recognize themselves. Like I said before, receptive language comes before expressive language. So it's so helpful for a child this young to learn a lot of these simple directions, to come here or sit down. They'd be able to do that in the mirror. You can go close, you can go far, and learn some basic concepts and early prepositions. You can cover their eyes and say, oh no, where'd you go? And kind of start a little bit of that peekaboo. They'll be able to start understanding a couple of actions as well. Be like, can you jump? I can jump. And you can show the child how to jump in front of the mirror. You can show the child how to clap their hands in front of the mirror. And you can also have them like find something in the mirror, looking in that reflection. So doing a whole bunch of those different activities helps with their body awareness. It helps with understanding how their body moves, and it also builds on their receptive language. So I think it's a really great way to kind of help children learn about themselves and the world around them.
And then you also said that you work
Mm-hmm.
um, with the preschool age. So what do you see as far as communication skills, and then what strategies do you use with the preschool age too?
So, with a lot of my preschool children, I work with a variety of them. I have some children that are working on augmentative and alternative communication. So, they aren't using words, we're figuring out the devices or programming devices so that they're able to communicate. Um, for some other children, some strategies that I like to use to expand a lot of language is kind of adding to what they say. So, for example, if a child says truck, you can say big truck. I like the truck. And you're adding there a little bit of a descriptor, you're adding a comment, you're talking about preference, and you can just add so much more to what they say. So a big thing for expanding expressive language that I've been doing is doing that adding, as well as kind of just commenting on anything that they're interested in. So a huge hit with kids right now would be Paw Patrol or PJ Masks. And I've done a ton
Mhm.
of things that are themed with them where I have a little PJ Mask character and I can hide him under things. So I'd ask where he went, and you can kind of model he's under the blanket. And that kind of develops some of the language there. And it also works a little bit on basic concepts. So taking a bunch of different objects like figurines or a ball even, and just hiding it under things or over things. Or if you take them and put them next to you, it's next to them. A lot of those basic concepts and a lot of those foundational prepositions should be developing around that preschool age. So there's a lot of those that we work on as well. I think that another really common thing that I try to work on with the kiddos is their understanding of feelings. As you know, working with a lot of the little kids, they have really, really big feelings. And
Yes.
they can get really, really upset about things, or they can get really frustrated. I have one preschooler that I work with who loves the Philadelphia Eagles. And lately, he doesn't really know how to express how he feels about them losing. So we've been working a lot on, I'm feeling disappointed. I'm feeling frustrated. And, we'll stomp our feet a little bit. We'll get really mad. And we kind of work and use a lot of things that are really relatable and things that are meaningful for him, so that we can kind of learn those feelings. Then there's other things that we can talk about that make us happier. So when we get to go to the grocery store and mom buys my favorite cookies, I feel really happy, or I feel ecstatic. And like getting little kids to start using a lot of those words is really incredible. And a lot of times I find parents really, really excited that their kids are actually using these words with meaning, except for, when they say, I'm frustrated at mommy, then it's not as exciting. But being frustrated at the Eagles is something I feel like we can all relate to, being in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's funny you said that. My daughter, she had learned, because I can't even think of the word right now. Her teacher had taught it, but it was in reference to her feeling. And we were driving home from school, and I did something, like I guess she wanted to stop at the store or something, and I kept going home. And she used the word that she learned in school, and I turned around and I was like, what did you just say? And she used it appropriately in a sentence. She had to be like 4 or 5. And I was like, where did you learn that word from? And she was like, my teacher taught me. And she was like, she said that if I was feeling that way, to just let them know how I felt. And I was like, oh goodness. And I just thought it was so funny how she said it. And like you were saying, they said it in the proper manner. Like and it made sense. And then I had to apologize to her because I didn't explain to her that we were going straight home. Like, it was no reason, to stop at the store. That was our normal routine. Like, we would stop, she would get a snack if she had a good day, her and her brother, and then we would go home. But that day, I changed the routine up. So she was feeling some type of way about it, and she let me know. And it was just so funny how she did it. But and I love, like, in a classroom, when I was working as a classroom teacher, that was one of the things that you really have to express to the children, because you don't know what they are going through at home. And then sometimes they do bring those emotions into the classroom. So to make sure that the environment is a happy and safe environment, like, you got to be able to explain those emotions to them, whether it's through play, whether it's, we used to have a feelings chart where if they couldn't tell us verbally how they were feeling, they could look at the chart and it had pictures of other children, and they were able to point out, which feeling they were feeling at the moment. So I think that is very important in preschool, to be able to express and to be able to tell. You really do think that that's very important for them to learn at the preschool age. And then, so, for your practice right now, since we're in the pandemic, are you doing virtual for the practice as well? For your private?
Yes. So I'm doing free consultations for families that are interested in services. After speaking with them and having the consultation, we can decide whether a screening or a full evaluation will be done. And then after that, we kind of just see from the results whether or not we'll be continuing with therapy, or if they want to take the evaluation and try to utilize it with another therapist. I find that sometimes families want to do that because I'm not yet accepting health insurance yet. So I've been able to kind of get the evaluation completed from them. I might be able to kind of take it where they would like.
Okay. Okay. And then, are you just meeting with families in Philadelphia County?
So I'm meeting with families in the state of Pennsylvania right now. I'm a licensed therapist in this state only. I used to be licensed in New Jersey because that's originally where I'm from. But since moving here, I've had enough of a need around here to kind of work with just Philadelphia families and the surrounding suburbs.
Okay. Okay. And then how would they find out how to reach you for the private practice?
So I have a website, phillyspeech.com, and I also have an Instagram account, Philly Speech, and there I kind of post some of my resources that I really enjoy. I post some language tips, and I also post some photos from things that I like to use in therapy with some suggestions or what goals families or kids are working on.
Okay. And then what strategies and tips would you give a family? And it could be for any age, whether preschool or toddler age. Things to like look out for if they have like some concerns that their child is not communicating. And I know we get this a lot with like first time parents because they're, they don't know what to expect when or what age milestones their child should be doing certain things. So normally that's where the pediatricians come in and ask them the question when they come in for the certain milestone visits with the doctor. So what would you say is some things that they can look out for if it's like in between that annual time that they need to see their pediatrician?
So, around 1 to 2 years old, if they're not understanding things that you say to them, I would definitely bring that up. It might not necessarily be receptive language or understanding. Sometimes children have hearing loss and they're not listening and processing the things that we're saying, or they might just have ear infections and they need to get tubes in or get some fluid drained from the ears, and then they'll be able to hear a lot more and they'll start communicating more. So definitely just if they're not understanding or hearing you. Another thing that I would look for is if they're not using words yet around 12 to 18 months. Usually around that time, children should have about 2 to 6 words consistently, and they should be building up on it. If they aren't using words yet, I would definitely, maybe make a phone call, talk to the pediatrician, or call the early intervention and see if they can get an evaluation. And then getting a little bit older, if they're not saying at least 50 words or starting to combine words at 2 years old, I would definitely bring that up to a pediatrician or, consult a speech pathologist. Also, another thing to look at is even if the child is talking, with every year of life, there's kind of a percentage associated with how much you should be able to understand. So around 1 year old, you should understand like 25% of what a child says. Around 2 years old, their intelligibility or how well you understand them should be about 50%. At 3 years old, you should understand about 75%. And then at 4 years old, you should fully understand a lot of what they're saying. And around that time also, right before they turn 4, if they're having, trouble saying words, or if they're repeating only the first sound of words, like if they say ball instead of ball, or if they're stopping a lot or they're stretching sounds. So if they're saying see you later or, kind of holding it, I would definitely see there might be a little bit of a stutter. It is very, very common and typical for people to stutter, but those types of stutters are something that I would definitely take a look at. Because sometimes a kid will go, I want it. And that's a little bit more common because they're just thinking of the word of what they want to say. Whereas where something like kind of getting stuck on just the sound or elongating the sound or stopping is a little bit more disfluent.
And then, so you brought up a couple things that I wanted to talk more about.
Sure.
So I know you brought up the ear infection. So I know working as a special instructor, normally that's like one of the questions that I normally ask the parent when it's the communication issue. So I
Mm-hmm.
normally ask, have they ever had a hearing test,
Mm-hmm.
or if they need a hearing test. And then the second thing is the ear infections, if they suffer from a lot of ear infection. And then sometimes I get that a lot on my caseload when I do have like communication issues. And I know it's always this one family that I always bring up because the little boy, I was with him since he was like 6 months all the way up until 3. And we couldn't, like, we got to the point where he had speech, he had myself as a special instructor, and he was saying words. He was saying at least 1 or 2 word phrases, but we couldn't figure out why it wasn't coming out clear. And he did have like a few ear infections, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing that mom was concerned about. And I just kept like reviewing, like, because since I had been with him for so long, I just kept like reviewing his notes and going over everything. And then I had talked to his mom, and the speech therapist, and you could talk about this also after I ask this question, like the ear, nose, and throat, like how you guys can look at all 3 of those areas and kind of um, figure out like what may be going on, because I know that's like additional learning that you guys do, and I'm saying you guys as in speech therapists, that you learn when you're in school and what to look out for. So for him, when his mom took him, later on, we did find out that he did have like a mild hearing loss,
Mm-hmm.
and that brought like it brought a lot of light to the family because at and in school too, they just was like, oh, he want to listen when he wants to listen, or oh, he can hear what he want to hear, and
Mm-hmm.
they just kept saying like those phrases, and I kept saying, well, it got to be something, because when you're on his left side, he can hear you, he's fine, he answers you if you call him, but if you're on your right side, he wasn't turning his head, he wasn't responding, and I was like, it has to be something. And then, like I said, we did find out later on that it was a mild hearing loss. But what things should a family look out for? Because again, like I was saying, a lot of stuff that the child exhibits, they always say it's like behavior related.
Mm-hmm.
So what things should they look out for when it's dealing with ear infection?
Not paying attention to sounds and tugging at their ear a lot because that's showing a lot of discomfort there. Not responding to their name, especially if you know your child does know his or her name and you're calling them and they're not responding. Not following simple directions so you know that they know how to do things and it seems like they aren't really listening. And then just generally having a speech and language delay. You can also hear it sometimes, and sometimes their speech, like you mentioned before in your example, sometimes the child doesn't speak as clearly. And definitely just having them checked out for those ear infections, definitely getting an audiologist to try to look at them just to make sure everything is clear would definitely be helpful, especially if you have concerns. And I would definitely recommend that parents would act early, and getting help early is better than waiting, especially because through ChildLink and through Elwyn there are free services available when children do qualify, and also they're able to kind of catch up to a lot of those milestones or anything that they're missing before that gap becomes even larger when they start kindergarten.
Yeah, and I do agree with that because that was one of the concerns I had with my son, because he received early intervention up until he was 5.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to that, like when he was 2 or 3, he would say single words. He can identify pictures. He could identify things in the house. But he wasn't doing the 2 word phrases.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only maybe he would say I did it, like that was it, because he got that from Dora the Explorer. But
Mm-hmm.
other than that, like that was the only thing that he would say that was more than a 1 word phrase. So when he tested for ChildLink for speech, he came out, he didn't qualify for that 25% delay.
Mm-hmm.
So they just said because he was already receiving PT, physical therapy, and occupational therapy. And we were actually about to phase him out and close his case for those two therapies. But they said that they would just keep an eye on him, so they would monitor him. The service coordinator would call and check up on him every, I think it was 30 or 60 days. But I took the initiative to go to Children's Hospital to have the speech therapist take a look at his communication. So when we got there and we went into the room, he wouldn't say nothing. Not even the one word, single word phrases. He wouldn't say anything. He was quiet the whole time she was doing her assessment. And then when we left, we walk out of the room, we closed the door, and Children's Hospital used to have a McDonald's in there.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got out, he was like, McDonald's? And I was like, you just sat in that room for 2 hours and said nothing. And then you come out and you start asking for McDonald's. And I was, they do question the parent to get further information for the assessment. But I was like, if she write on her paper that he doesn't talk because he didn't say a word in there. Like, he didn't even say hi. Like, when she said hi to him, he just looked at her. He didn't even say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do with cases like that when they just, and then I can understand why he did it, because she was a stranger. He didn't know her. We was going into this room. She was having him do these activities. And I know a lot of our kids that we get on our caseload, they go through the evaluation process to see if they're eligible for the services. So what do you do when you have a child where on paper it looks like one thing, but the family is saying that the child, has some communication, but on paper it's like the child didn't say anything at all?
Well, I definitely, that's what I said before. I kind of try to find out what the child can understand and how the child communicates. I try to kind of take a step back a little bit, and it's actually a little easier to see how the child really does behave through Zoom because they're at home in a familiar environment. And even though I am present, I'm just present on a screen, and they're used to seeing people on screens now. So the big thing to do there is to really get to know the child. And at times, sometimes we ask for another evaluation, we'll try again, especially if it wasn't an accurate depiction of communication skills. Or I'll ask the parent, if you don't mind, can you show me a recording or anything of your child interacting, or can you show me some of his language skills, because because he's not comfortable right now. And sometimes it does take a little bit time for the child to warm up, and it's not a completely accurate depiction of their skills. I definitely take a lot of parent report, because the parent knows their child best. So that's who I kind of get most of the information from. And then I kind of work from there and kind of see where we can go and things. We definitely note that also in our evaluations if there's a discrepancy, and also note, if the child didn't qualify, and there's a lot more that the parents are saying that would make them qualify, we would definitely address that and try again.
Anything that you want to share with the listeners in reference to speech therapy or in reference to anything? I know right now we're in our routines are a little different right now because we're home, and we're doing therapy through Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you want to say to the families that would one, encourage them during this time, and then the other thing is just working on different strategies and communication skills?
So we've been mentioning before, children learn through play, and you can make any routine a language activity through your daily routines. Don't feel like you have to kind of carve out hours of your day to read these books and get on the floor and play with them. And you definitely should try to read to your child each night to kind of expose them through language, because children learn through that repeated exposure. If they don't hear it and they don't watch it, if they don't experience it, they're not going to learn it yet. But a couple of things that they can do is when they're giving their child a bath, you can focus on learning body parts. We're washing your hair now. Where's your hair? Okay, where's your nose? I got your nose. and, even using the toys, where's Ducky's nose? It's going to start making that language a little bit more useful and predictable. And it's something that's going to be like every day. You can focus on like one body part a week or two body parts a week. Like these are your ears and these are your hands, and we're going to wash them. This will be a routine. It gives the child a chance to hear the same thing over and over again. And as it becomes predictable, the more and more they hear it, we're hoping that that'll bring them closer to saying it. You can even work on singing everything that you do. I like telling parents to do the This Is the Way song. So this is the way we brush our teeth, brush our teeth, brush our teeth. This is the way we brush our teeth early in the morning. You can do that song with brushing teeth. You can do the song with washing hands. You can do that song with put on socks, put on shirt. So you can teach a lot of the clothing materials that way. And you can even do just talking all the time when you're doing things with your child. If you're going to go to the grocery store, you would narrate that whole activity. We're going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to start the car. Uh-oh, I hear beeps. Uh-oh, slow down. I see a stop sign. We stop. Ready, set, let's go. And a lot of these verbal routines and just speaking to your child, giving them that language model helps them learn so much more about what they're doing and using these real words. And it's okay to say, oh, I love the little doggy. The doggy says woof, woof. But, using a lot of those real words, hi, dog, big dog, pet the dog, is so much more meaningful and so much more useful for them in the future, because that's how most people are going to be using it. That's the way it's going to be written in a lot of their children's books. And it'll be a great way for them to learn. And the last activity that I would highly recommend to do with language is cooking. You can have your child cook, pour, scoop, a lot of verbs, mix, yummy. Should we put more? Cooking is such a great activity. Uh-oh, it's hot. And like describing a lot of the foods, and then even eating, naming all the foods, talking about their texture. Ooh, the cracker is crunchy. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Do you hear my crunch? Your turn. Kind of turning all of these things that you're doing every single day and just adding so much language to it is a great way to get the child to hopefully start imitating words.
Yeah, one way that I look at it is it's like the more you give them, it's like a light bulb goes off in their head, and then they just like start repeating, or like not even repeating, but just saying what you were saying to them like all this time. I know if my son, when he wasn't, like I said, he was doing like the single words. But we used to play a game in a car where we would say, I see, and then we would say what we see. So one time we would play that game, and one day we were in a car, and we were driving to North Carolina to see my sister, and we rode past him. Right, he saw the sign for Rite Aid, and we wasn't even playing the game. Like he was just like, I see Rite Aid, and I was like, what? And he remembered, because it was a familiar store that he would see here in Philadelphia that that we shopped at. We got our most of his medicine from. And he knew that I would be like, I gotta go to Rite Aid to get your medicine. And he knew the sign. So when he saw it while we were driving, he was like, I see Rite Aid. And it was just like, wow. I was like, I didn't even know you knew that word. Like, I got so excited. But it's just like you apply it and you say it, like you were saying, like with your routine, and then they'll grasp onto it, and they're practicing it, they're listening to it, and they'll surprise you one day. And they'll say it, and you'll be like, oh wow. And then like I tease my families when I'm working with them, because when I start with the child, they're like, we only started about maybe 5 words. And then by the time we leave, they were like, he won't shut up. Like, I did my job. Like, you wanted me to get him to talk, so he's talking now. And then, and now we just got to, make sure that it's, he's using it in the proper form. But it's so funny because they just be like, he won't shut up now. Or they'll text me and be like, he said this. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, he repeated this. And I'm like, well, that's how he learns. But You did bring back to my memory what the question was when you was talking about the children's book.
Mm-hmm.
So when a parent is reading a book to a child, what things should they emphasize? Like I know I normally tell a parent like they don't have to read every word in the book, but be more observe, for them to observe more like the pictures so they can identify like what's in the picture and then kind of relate it to like everyday routine. So can you talk about like what they should focus on when they're reading a book to their child?
Definitely. So I would recommend when reading a book, I usually don't like reading them word for word with kids that are, are birth to three kiddos. If they're between 2 and 3 years old, we're looking through this book and we're labeling the things that we see. We're talking about where things are. Where's the pencil? I can't find it. Can you help? And you turn it into an interactive experience. So you're not just reading at the child, it's a reciprocal kind of activity. It's something that you guys are doing together. I love the flat books so that the children can kind of work on some of their fine motor skills and kind of open, and you can kind of work on requesting. Can we open it? Can you open the door? We can knock on the door and the child can open it, and then you can talk about what's hiding under there. If the character looks really, really sad in the book, oh no, sad, he's crying. And you can pretend to cry. Your turn, kind of have your child pretend to cry as well. Or, oh look, he's laughing, so funny. He's happy. I'm happy. Your turn, you do happy. And you notice that a lot of times when I use a lot of my examples, I try not to ask as many questions. I try to make it a turn taking activity, and I try to tell the child, oh, it's your turn, you try it. Because the more and more you bombard them with questions, the more it becomes a little bit more of like a quiz. And we don't really want to be quizzing the kids. We want them to learn things and we want them to enjoy it and we want it to be fun. It takes a lot of that pressure away. So a good formula would be kind of make 3 comments and then ask a question. There's a cat. There's a ship. There's water. Where's the water? Show me water. That would be a great way to do it, instead of like, where's the cat? Where's the water? Where's the ship? Where's this? Because it's more of you're kind of just doing a drill of like what they know, instead of making it kind of like a teaching activity. And I find that when you quote unquote read books without reading the words, you can make it so much more fun for them. I've also done a few things where I've adapted some books. I'll put tape pipe cleaners in between the pages when they're a little bit more difficult for the child to hold on their own, so that they can start turning more of the pages and it separates them a little bit better. I've also printed out tiny pictures of things on the book. So if the child is reading, and for example, if we're doing, if you give a mouse a cookie, I'll print out some pictures of cookies or pictures of things in the book, and I'll hold them up and I'll say, oh, I can't find cookie, help. And the child can pick it up and match it, and you can kind of turn it into an interactive activity that way too. So there's a ton of different ways that parents can use books. I really, really enjoy them in therapy sessions. I find that, hiding behind the books sometimes, even on Zoom, and having the child try to find me, oh, I'm behind the cat, is something really, really fun for them. So I definitely would say, be really animated and talk a lot about the feelings and talk about the things that you see in the book, and don't make it a, question answer quiz. And that way the child will feel so much more at ease, and it'll turn it more into a game.
Yeah, one of the activities I did with one of my kiddos the other day was he has the book The Snowy Day. And so he sits really well with the book. He's about, I think he's like 13 months, 13 or 14 months. So he sits really well with the book. So I had mom and him read the book together, just her picking out, parts of the pictures that was in the book. And then I looked up the actual book on YouTube. So I did the animated version. So that's what we did at the end. And he would, like, his face just lit up because the animated version, like the character Peter moves around. So he was like looking at the screen and then like touching it. And then like the part when Peter went up the hill, up the mountain, and then came down the mountain. Like I was like, he went up the mountain and he went down the mountain, and then he was looking like, like how did he do that? Because in the book he's not moving, so you could tell. Even though he didn't say any words, like you could tell he was doing nonverbal cues, like to look and see, like and he scrunched up his face, like to say, like how did that happen? It was just funny to see like his reaction from it. Can you talk about nonverbal cues that you can look for your child?
Yeah, so another aspect of communication I didn't actually touch base upon is social or pragmatic communication. And that's a whole, it varies. So, an important thing to remember is that the social communication varies from culture to culture. For us, using the English language, social communication in pragmatics has three major categories. And that would be using language for all those different reasons, for greeting, for requesting, for asking questions, for promising someone something. For changing language is the second skill that we have to do is, talking differently to a baby than talking differently to an adult, or a child talking differently to a pet than they would to a friend, as well as how much more information that we give kids. For example, when we're giving kids directions, we're going to be a little bit more specific. And the last thing that you mentioned before was learning a lot of those nonverbal cues and stuff like that. So following a lot of those rules for conversation. And that's where we're seeing if they're taking turns with us when we're talking. So sometimes when we're holding things up, a kid might say, oh, bus, bus, it's bus, bus. And they're saying it and we're saying, oh yeah, do you see the person? And they're still saying bus, bus, bus. And they're not participating in reciprocal conversation. They're just labeling and labeling and labeling. And we have to kind of make sure that there is that back and forth going on in. And another thing that we look for further nonverbal communication, like you said before, was seeing his face light up. So their eyes widen, or they're making eye contact with you, and they're really understanding, and they're using gestures, they're pointing at it, or they're clapping their hands, or they might shake their head if they don't really like something. And you have to really read some of that body language and some of those cues to really see if a child is really listening and attending. And one of the easiest ones to see is if the child is, attending, if they're looking at it, if they're responding to it. But there are some children that I work with that don't really have that eye contact. And you'll see how they respond to it based a lot on their body language. So if they really don't like something, they might fall to the ground, or they might drop something, or they might really, really turn their whole body away. And they're communicating to you that they didn't really like something that they saw, or if they don't want to play with a toy that you presented to them. And that would kind of mean, okay, I'm reading that you don't like this, so I'm going to take it back. And for some of our children that don't have those verbalization skills, they will definitely let you know if they like something or don't like something.
That they will.
So they'll really, really tug at your hand and point at what they want, or they'll really push you away if you're really upsetting them because you keep presenting something that they don't want to do. And that's kind of like the fun dance that we have to play with them sometimes, because we want them to learn, and we want them to learn a lot of new concepts. But sometimes they want to go back to something really familiar. A lot of times I have children that want to do the same exact song. And I really am like, okay, we did Itsy Bitsy Spider 3 times already. Let's do Wheels on the Bus. And, that seems to be a little bit challenging sometimes when they're really used to something. But it's definitely important to kind of see if the child is attending to it, because if they're not having fun, and if they're not enjoying it, they're not really going to learn as much. It's really important for also the adult to have fun. If you feel like it's a one-way, learning experience, and it's you just kind of talking at the child and really, really trying to get a lesson done, there's not going to be a lot of learning done, because the child's either not interested and you're not having fun anymore because you're just repeating yourself.
And then so one more question,
Sure.
and then after that, then you can share with the listeners how they can contact you and reach out to you. So you were just saying just now, like when they're not interested in something, and then like the parent is like constantly repeating, what the child is saying. I know I know I felt this way too when I was um, helping my son when he was learning um, his communication skills. Like when you hear yourself, like just identifying everything, like the red pencil and the white hat and the pink jacket, and then when you get around adults, because you're so used to being with your child, then you find yourself talking like that too. So can you just and I know some parents in the beginning it's like frustrating for them because they're like identifying everything and giving more emphasis on what the item is so that their child can learn those communication skills. Can you talk to the parents about how they may feel in the beginning stages of when they're helping their child with the communication skills?
Sure. Sometimes you feel like you're just talking and you're talking out loud to yourself, but try to think of it in a sense that your child is like a sponge right now, and everything that you're saying and everything that you're doing, they're taking it in. And when it gets to a point where you're just like, I am so exhausted of doing this, you can kind of just tell yourself, I'm going to name what I'm going to give my child 3 times before I give it to them, and that's all I'm going to do today. Like, you got to give yourself a little bit of a break as well. Like, I know that it's a lot to, be like, okay, we're going to go to the store, shoes on, jacket on, get in the car, turn, beep, beep, beep. Like, it doesn't have to be nonstop, because sometimes we want to pause sometimes to see if the child will repeat, or wait and see if the child has something to say. Because if we just keep giving and giving and giving and giving, we're not giving them a chance to respond or to say and show us what they know. So it is challenging sometimes, but I like the 3 to 5 rule. So you're trying to get your child to say cup, cup, cup. I love this cup. You say cup, cup. You want the cup. Hand the cup over. We're done talking about the cup. So, that's one way to kind of just not drive yourself totally crazy. Use the 3 times rule and then kind of hand it over and then kind of move on. You can also do the 3 times rule. Hold the cup for a little bit. Count for 5 to 7 seconds. See if your child will try to verbalize or reach for it, and then hand it over. That'd be a really great way to kind of just time it and kind of put an end to it, so that you're not just constantly doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you talked about the pause and wait, and give the child the opportunity to like I tell like some of my parents, if they give you a sound, that's good. Or if they're learning the word and they're able to say it, if you hear a piece of the word, like if they say oops instead of juice, like they're giving you something, so they are understanding, and listening to what's going, what you're saying and teaching them, so they are taking it in,
Mm-hmm.
and learning. So, how can I know you did share your email address in reference to the private practice? So can you just again let the listeners know how they can contact you?
Sure.
And
So my website is www.phillyspeech.com. And then my Instagram account is just Philly Speech. So I can be contacted via website, via Instagram, and then my email and number and all that are attached to those.
okay, awesome. And you said that you service the state of Pennsylvania,
Correct.
correct?
Kids of all ages. So the oldest kid I work with right now is 12, and the youngest I work with is 7 months.
Okay. And then so when they're school age, are you working on like more of a if it's a diagnosis, or are you still working on like communication?
So a little bit of both. Some children, it's actually very common for children to have speech for those speech sounds, and be working on our speech sounds is articulation for some of the parents, and a lot of the times they are going to be working with language because they're having trouble in school. A lot of times I have kids with a mixed language disorder, so it's going to be expressive and receptive. So when they're in the classroom, it's really hard for them to follow 3-step directions, like take off your coat, get in your chair, take out your pencil, and write in your journal. That's so many steps, and that's really, really challenging for kids that have difficulty processing language. And then also we have some children that are not using as many words to verbalize, so we work a little bit on either stuttering or expressive language. So there's a whole mix in all of them.
Okay. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with us today.
Sure, thank you for having me.
And you're welcome. You're welcome. Just glad that we were able to talk and share with the listeners what strategies that they can use, what things to look for when they see communication challenges for their child,
Mm-hmm.
and then how they can implement them in their daily routine. So this was a great opportunity. I think I was about to say I think you might be the first person that I had on besides myself dealing with early intervention. But I had my other guest that I had on. She's a social worker
Mm-hmm.
in early intervention. So just making sure that the families know the services that are out there for early intervention, which is the special instructor, speech therapist, physical therapist, occupational therapist, and social worker. And all that can be, if your child is in need of any of those services, can be accessed through ChildLink here in Philadelphia, or you can search for early intervention in the county that you may be in here in Pennsylvania, or even if you're outside of Pennsylvania, you would just type in early intervention for the state or country. So again, thank you for coming on and sharing with us. Next, I know we talked about briefly having us do like a video, so you can show some of the skills, like when you're saying you might hide behind the book on Zoom, or you may use those different strategies that you were talking about for the families. And I know I work with her, so she's awesome when it comes to like the storytelling with the Zoom background. So that's why I said one day we're going to get a chance to do a live video where we can see her in action, because she is really awesome when she's working with the kids. And like I said, she keeps them engaged. I've been with some speech therapists where they were doing more of that drill that you was talking about.
Yeah.
And it's like the child just like walked away. Like even if when we was in person, the child just like walked away, and then they would have to bring them back and get them engaged. But I like how you work with the children um that we've been working with so far. So any last comments or anything that you want to share with them?
Sure, I have one useful piece of information. I hope parents find it useful, is word count. So, like we've talked a lot before, is expressive language. There's a bunch of different things that count as words other than, saying the words themselves, as long as the child is using it consistently and intentionally. So, for example, if a child says ba for bottle or ma for more, that's a word approximation, and they're doing it consistently, that counts as a word. If they're using sound effects like beep, 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 or vroom, vroom, those also count as words. Animal sounds like moo, quack, especially if they're using them outside of the song, those count as words. Using sign language, so if they're doing the more sign, if they're doing the eat sign, if they're doing thank you, those signs count as words. And fun words also count, like uh-oh or wee. All of those exclamatory words count as words. So for parents out there that have children that are doing that consistently, those do count as words. So I definitely give your child credit for that.
Yeah, that was a good point. That definitely was a good point, because you'll hear the parents say he's only saying three words: mom, dad, and cat, and that's it. And then when you see them, like you were saying, they're doing uh-oh, they're doing room, they're doing quack quack for the duck. So that definitely was a good point for parents to know that they are considered words. It might be not the full word that you want them to say, but they are saying words because they are associating it with the actual thing. Like the vroom vroom would be for a car, and the moo would be for the cow. They might not be saying cow, but they are making the sound.
Absolutely. And we can't expect them at 2 years old to be saying speech sounds or having them say words exactly the way adults say them. So kind of putting it through a lens of like developmentally, that's pretty appropriate kind of for where they are, especially it's for the first time that they're using these sounds and using these words.
It's been really great information for our families who have children in the school age or younger, of what signs to look for, what to work on, and how to implement it in their daily routine, and also how to reach out to receive the assistance that they may need for their child for communication skills. If you need to get in touch with Ali, she did share her information. Like I said, she's really good with working with the children, and she does have her own private practice where she can assess and give you information. So again, follow her on her Instagram page or contact her via her website. Our listeners for listening for today and getting as much value as you can in reference